So hi everybody, it's Falcon Napier. Welcome to the Oracle of the Self. This is our weekly coaching program. And today what I'd like to do is finish up our little walk through the different layers of the ChangeGrid, just so you guys have a rather complete sort of an experience. As we get into it, I will give you just a couple of heads up. The first one is that while we are on the Starlink network, when it's working, oh my gosh, it is lightning fast. But they did say we're going to be entering a part of the ocean that they haven't bothered putting the satellites above because there's nothing near. So it'll probably get pretty dicey for the next couple of days. So those of you that participate in the Circle of Brilliance calls, I'm going to be surprised if we can pull those off. So I'll send you an email or send you a cancellation notice in the event they tell us we can forget about it. But today things are still good, so that's fine. The other thing is that Diane is off at one of the concerts that's happening on board, and she may come back to the suite at some point in time, in which case you might hear Diane walk in which case I'll say, sit down, join the call. So anywho, with that, let's go ahead and get into these other layers. To make it a little bit more meaningful for everybody, let's do what we did last time one more time. So think about a situation that's going on in your world right now. So a problem you're trying to solve, a situation you're trying to process, a goal you're trying to meet, an issue you're trying to resolve, whatever. Just get something in your mind, and then I'll lead you through answering our two questions around it. So I'll shut up for a second while you think about your activity or your situation. Okay, now, who can tell me what the two questions are? I'm going to ask you to do two ratings. What are the two things I'm going to ask you to do?
Level of challenge
and ability.
Challenge and ability. So we generally do ability first, although sometimes I do wonder why we do that. It might just because it's the x-axis, but when you think about that situation, how would you rate your ability to get that situation to turn out the way you want it to? So again, scale of 0 to 12, 0 is low, 12 is being high. And keep in mind as you're answering it that nothing is lower than 0 and nothing is higher than 12. And so you want to kind of reserve those two extremes for only the extreme situations. Appreciate all the shades of gray between rather than swinging to one extreme or the other. So how do you rate your ability to get that situation to turn out the way you want it to? And lock that number in. And then the second question is, how challenging is it going to be? Again, scale of 0 to 12. Keep in mind that 0 and 12 represent the extremes for challenge. So a 0 is effortless. And by effortless, I don't mean really, 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 really easy. I mean 0 effort required. And to give yourself a 12 means it's impossible. And I legitimately, literally mean impossible for something to be up there as a 12. So hopefully you'll never encounter any challenge of 12 situation in your entire life. But 11 is a good answer if you're in a super, super stressful situation. So just avoid the extremes whenever you can, because the ChangeGrid is intended to cover the full range of possibilities in human responses. So, okay, so get your number in mind. Higher the number, the higher the challenge, higher the number, higher your ability. And then once you've got your coordinates, if you guys want to, we can do what we did last time, and you can give me what your coordinates were, and I'll pop you somewhere on the ChangeGrid. So who wants to go first? Anybody? Tom, Anja, you guys are the only ones unmuted right now, so burden falls on your shoulders. Oh, Brian's here. Hey, Brian. You can...
5 and challenge 8.
Okay, 5 and 8. Was that what you said?
Yes.
Okay, so Anja is at 5 and 8. Oops. Let me go ahead and scooch over here. There's 5. We count ourselves up to 8. Right, there's 5 and 8. Okay, Tom, how about you?
I'll go 6 and 9.
Okay, Tom is at 6 and 9. Let's scooch you around. There's 6 all the way up to 9, right next to Anja. How nice. Very sweet.
Aw, Anja time.
There. Okay. Brian, you got one? David, Tim?
7 and 10.
Okay, so who was that?
Go ahead, Brian.
9 and 8.
9 and 8 for Brian. 8 for Brian. That puts Brian right there-ish. Okay, who's next?
7 and 10.
7 and 10 for David. La, 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 la. Kind of slamming right in there next to Tom. So I'm going to plot you just below where your coordinates were. Yep. And who else? Tim?
9 and 10.
9 and 10. And I think that was Tim.
Yep.
Okay, great. 9 and 10. 9. Doody booty doody da 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 da. Okay, Chris, you got one?
9-9.
9 for Chris. Okay, fine.
Oh,
We're an outgrid group.
What an outgrid group. So let's see how this all, okay, you said 9 and 9. Right, there you go. All right. So yeah, you guys are pretty well concentrated together. Of course, you all have your own separate activities. So this is just a good way to just look at multiple people on a bunch of different activities. But overall, it is true. You guys feel that you possess somewhere an ability of somewhere between 5 and 9. And you face a challenge, a much tighter challenge. I think that's all 8s or 9s of the 10, 8, 9, 10. So yeah. So yeah, general energies are pretty similar around those. So now let's see if I can do this without causing the ship to tilt. Can I grab all of you guys? Now let's group you so I can move you. Where did group go? Insert, format, arrange, group. Yes. Okay, fine. So let's talk about the layers that I wanted to make sure we complete. So you guys certainly know the basic grid itself, the 5 levels of tension, about the levels of intensity, about how the levels of intensity overlaid on the levels of tension help you to better understand that not all moments in a particular level of tension are going to feel the same. You know about the 4 different quadrants, so upgrid, outgrid, downgrid, and ingrid. And just as a way of review, you know that if I drew a vertical vector, if you will, straight up and down the change grid, I'm looking at the difference in tension someone's experiencing. Horizontally, what am I looking at? Anyone remember? What changes from being very far out grid to being far in grid?
oh, I remember you talking about that.
Yeah, a little bit of it is about the level of intensity. So 7 is certainly far, far, far more intense than being very far in grid. So we think of that that horizontal sort of line as being the amount of drive someone's experiencing. So the further out grid you go, the more driven you become, and we'll get into that in greater detail today. So, and you'll also hear the word energy. When I combine your perceived level of scratch that, when I combine your level of tension and your level of drive, put those 2 things together and you're giving me what your level of energy is around something. What energy do you have around it? So we try to change the language to something specific for each layer, just so we can get that across. So so upgrade, outgrid, downgrid, ingrid. You guys have probably heard us use a different word for being outgrid, upgrade, downgrid, and ingrid. So let's go to that layer. Oh, by the way, we've also talked about danger zones. We've talked about how the danger zones all come together on the back of the change sphere, if you want to be looking at it as a 3-dimensional kind of a ball. But this is one of the layers I want to make sure we get very well covered. People who read change grids as part of their living will almost always use this layer. So it's one of the more common. If I'm reading someone's change grid, I tend to focus on the levels of tension they might be experiencing, the energy they have around it, which is this particular layer, and then the engagement, how engaged they are. Because we like to be able to say to our clients that the change grid is designed to answer 4 questions for you about any situation that they happen to be in. So the question is, how ready is the person to do it? How likely are they to follow through and do what needs to be done? How engaged are they in doing it? And what type and level of support are they going to need to keep them on track, and et cetera. So that's what's happening on that. All right, so now you'll notice, come on in, Diane.
AT,
Yeah.
can you mention those 4 questions again?
Yeah, the 4 questions are: how ready is someone to do what needs to be done? How engaged are they in doing what needs to be done? How likely are they to actually follow through and get it done? And what type and level of support are they going to need in order to give them the best possible chance of getting things to turn out? So we described the ChangeGrid, and as far as we know, it's the only instrument of its kind that is descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive. So when I look at someone's ChangeGrid, I can tell you a whole lot about what's going on. That's the descriptive part. And I can tell you that based on where you are, that as long as you remain there, I can tell you what's likely to happen or not happen. There is a very powerful predictive element in reading a ChangeGrid. But ultimately, the real work of being a ChangeWorks professional is providing people with the training or the coaching or the consulting, the guidance they might need. So it's telling us the prescription that would best help that person as well. So that's what we're trying to do in all those sorts of things. All right, so a couple of minutes ago, I mentioned those 4 quadrants as being outgrid, upgrid, ingrid, and downgrid. So we use a different label for them when we get to the energy level. So we say there are 4 primary energies that you can feel about doing a particular activity. And the primary energy is identified by a word in all capital letters. So if we go to this outgrid quadrant, you'll see that the word in all capital letters is what?
Driver.
Driver. So you are a driver when it comes, you have a driver energy about the activity that around here. So the driver energy is all about going somewhere, getting something done. So whether it's to accomplish a task, whether it's to achieve a goal, whatever it is, this whole idea about being a driver is about having a destination in mind and putting yourself into motion to get there. And that's what the driver is all about, driver energy getting all about. Now for upgrid, the word in all capital letters is what word?
Expressive.
It's expressive. And what the expressive energy wants to do is to feel something. So the expressive energy wants to feel something. It wants to share that feeling with someone else. So whether that feeling is one of the emotions or that feeling is some kind of excitement and exhilaration and anticipation, all those sorts of things, that's what the expressive energy wants to do, wants to feel something. So it's excited to go to the party. It loves being on a roller coaster. It doesn't mind taking some calculated risks. It likes being put into an uncomfortable situation. At the same time, the expressive energy has a very dark side to it as well, because sometimes you end up in difficult situations through no real choice of your own. You just happened into an unfortunate circumstance. You're still going to be feeling something, and you're still going to want to express whatever it happens to be that you're feeling. So we got a driver energy that wants to make something happen, and we have an expressive energy that wants to be feeling something. They want to be up there energized and excited, hopefully not terrified, and all the things that could be the worst case scenario. Any questions about driver or expressive so far? So good? Yep. Okay. Now ingrid, so this quadrant over here, the ingrid energy is the amiable energy. The amiable energy wants to care about something. Generally, the amiable energy is about caring about other people, but I think you could also put in pets and things like that. So someone once suggested that it's about caring for another animate object. So whether that's a person, whether that's an animal, whatever it is, but amiable people also can care about causes, things like that, but they definitely care. And for that energy to be satisfied, there has to be some element of caring, acknowledgement for caring, etc. And that leaves the last energy, which would be downgrid. That's the analytical energy. The analytical energy wants to know something, wants to figure it out. It, likes to solve problems. It likes to collect data for no reason other than to have it. So the analytical energy wants to understand and explore and whatever the case may be. So those are the 4 main energies that someone can experience. So drivers, expressives, amiables, and analyticals. Now, there are several personality tests that you could take that may very well give you a result that resonates very strongly with one of those four different energies. So, for example, if you were taking the disc profile would say that the driver quadrant, they would use the word dominance. So this is where the energy is very dominating. It's very much on top of things, in control, making things happen. So a lot of things that I've already said about driver would just simply be included in their description for dominance. Instead of expressive, if you were up there, you would be described as an I. And if I remember, they use it as influencer. Yeah, is that right, David? I think, are you our resident disc person?
Yes.
Yeah, so I is influence, right? Yeah.
Influence, yes.
Influence. And so they want to influence people. Again, you're trying to influence people by somehow or another capturing their heart, maybe awakening other emotions that will compel them to get involved. So sometimes we influence by painting a very wonderful and attractive picture, and sometimes we can influence by painting a very dark and dismal and dangerous kind of a situation. But nevertheless, I'm still trying to influence somebody. Now, you move over to amiable, and that would be the S type, which was about supportive. Is it supportive? Supporting? I forget their exact lingo, but it's one of those. And so that should resonate very much with what we've already said about the amiable energy. Wants to care about something, wants to take care of something, care for other people, etc. And that leaves the analytical energy, which they describe as C. And C is compliant kind of thing. And it is true that people that are analytical as a personality type, or that are down there, they tend to be rather compliant. Now, whether they're complying with rules that others have given them or complying with the own rules that they develop for themselves, they do appreciate order and organization and knowing what's really going on, how it works, why it works. So they like formulas and patterns and all that good sort of thing that's going along. Now, if you want to learn more about the disk profile, or you just want to know what your disk profile happens to be, there are many, I would venture to say countless resources online that will allow you to take any number of different personality tests for free. It's when you want the printed report that they start talking about money. And we can tell you, all of us that are human development professionals on the call, we can tell you that whatever they want to charge you for that, just refuse it. Because after you refuse it once or twice, suddenly the price gets chopped in half, or the next day you get an email offering it to you for $1, So don't be too eager to pay full price for any of the results that are going on there. If you're going to spend money on a disc profile, hire a coach, a consultant, because you really don't need the result as much as you need the guidance that comes along with the result if you really want to make any real changes. But DISC is probably, I'm not going to say it's one of the best, I'll just say it's one of the most popular. It has certainly been marketed extremely well for a very long period of time. So it most definitely has its act together, but it's not in any way the one. You're going to find lots and lots and lots of quadrant-based personality typing systems. And the way they tend to differ from one another is in how they come to the conclusion that you are a whatever. So they might have a choose from these four words, or which of these phrases is most like you and least like you, or rank these following things. So they got all different kinds of front-end engines that they'll use to get to whichever type you happen to have. And at the end of it, they may tell you that it's not really about your personality, it's really more about your temperament, or it's about your preferences, or it's about, they'll come up with some specific identifier or a specific result that they intended it to be for. And the reason why they're doing that is because they wanted to get their model validated. And in order to get the model validated, they had to be able to answer the question, validated for what purpose? And if you just say, well, because we're curious, that's not going to fly in the world of scientific, validation studies and things like that. Okay, so anyway, we know that these personality types exist. I can certainly tell you that I always test out as being an analytical type, surprise of all surprises. Um, but whatever word they want to use to describe me, that's all fine with me. The change grid is not a personality test. So we're not trying to tell you anything at all about who you are, although you may very well learn a great deal about who you are as you learn about tension management, learn about the change grid, and play with it a little bit. We are far, far, far more focused not on the who you are, but on the how you happen to be responding to a specific situation at a given moment in time. We believe that as that situation evolves, you're going to move around on the change grid. We believe that if we looked at all of the situations you're in simultaneously, you would not plot in just one quadrant or one spot on the change grid. You'd have a scatter pattern all over this thing because you don't feel the same way about every single thing you face in there. And that does fly in the face of a lot of personality typing tests because some of them will say that your personality is absolutely immutable, that it was etched in stone before you were even born, it's in your DNA. Others will say that your personality may change, but it's going to change slowly and subtly as life goes on. That certainly feels more realistic than the one that you're etched in stone. Some might even say that it's going to remain static until you encounter some sort of, they would call it a gross pattern interrupt. Something big happens in your life and that is so disruptive that you're not the same person ever again after encountering whatever it happens to be. And then there's those out there that say, no, your personality is very situational. So yeah, you might have a home base somewhere in the range of things, a place you're most comfortable. So your natural kind of default spot. But truth is, depending on the situation, you may be called upon to bring forth any one or any combination of these energies in order to do that activity well. So let me throw this to you guys as a question. Uh, which one of those do you think feels more realistic, if you will, or more practical, more whatever? What are your thoughts about the labeling of people and that? So let's see. T, Tom, Wanda,
Yeah,
Brian.
it depends. Some people do, really abhor being labeled if they think of themselves as that. But if you think of it, like I think of Myers-Briggs, it's a way to communicate. It's a way to understand somebody else to start with. It's really not a label. It's a place from which you to start talking.
Yeah. It's a Kodak moment.
There you go.
It's a place where you can just see where it's going on. Brian, what do you want to throw in?
I tend to believe that those elements in different contexts, that's what I appreciate most about the ChangeGrid. It's in different contexts about your personality will shift. I often hear the phrase that the best predictor of behavior is past behavior, something to that extent. And I think there's an element of truth to that. I don't think it's the truth because again, context matters and behavior and environment. You can't disconnect the two. So you can't disconnect the consciousness from the behavior and the content that's produced out of it. So I think those shift given different contexts, and I just use my own life as that laboratory, if you will, in terms of experience.
Very good, very good. Anybody else?
I tend to agree with Mark. I tend to think that maybe by age of 12, 15, people are formed and you're going to get minor changes over the years. But I think you know somebody when they're 18 and then you meet when they're 45, you're going to see the same carving in them.
Because by then the core patterns have been established, the core values are in place. So those sorts of things. In fact, I've often thought that really what governs personality isn't so much about the way they get into it, but as your values, your beliefs, are formed as your biases become stronger and stronger. That's where the personality is ultimately going to come from. It's all that kind of schedule. But we've just decided that there's no reason to debate it. If people find completing one of those tools to be useful and insightful, then please do it. But we would encourage you to do a bunch of them, as opposed to glom onto just one and think it's like, the divine insights. I will tell you that how I came to develop the ChangeGrid way, way, way back when I was first getting started. I was living in Ann Arbor, and I was in the earliest stages of developing the ChangeGrid, and I said to some colleagues of mine, some friends of mine that were using some of these quadrant-based psychometric tools, I said, well, I would like to ask your students 2 questions following their experience with that tool. And they, invited me to do that. And so after it was all done, I would say to the people, first question is, what did you turn out to be? And they would say whatever it was. It was my second question that was important. I said, and how do you feel about that label? And many, many, many times, more often than that, they would say, well, I really think I can see how I turned out to be a whatever, but I really think I'm all these things. It just depends on the situation. Just depends on the situation, just depends on the situation. And so what that told me was that the world didn't need another tool to describe who someone was. It needed a tool to describe situations.
Yeah.
And so that's what the ChangeGrid really is. It's situation specific. Yes.
I have a question for you. Would you say that a person who is experiencing moderate levels of tension probably has a tendency to be able to express their personality in a consistent and reliable fashion, but the higher the tension goes, the more variability there is?
I would say, yeah, I can certainly see a strong pattern around that, because I do think we're talking about volatility in behavior. Volatility in behavior most definitely occurs more often upgrid than downgrid, certainly. And I do think there's more volatility probably in grid than out grid, because in grid, they tend to be very, even though DISC is compliant to describe downgrid, we know that amiable people in the in-grid danger zone are very compliant, but it's mostly because they're afraid of the consequences of failing to comply. And the expressive is just in a very chaotic, dangerous kind of a situation. So their thoughts are all over the place. So yeah. Now, I mean, like I said, I'm an analytical, and on my most expressive day, I'm still an analytical, but because I'm trying to figure out if all the safety mechanisms are working. So, yeah, it's different. Okay, so let's take this to another step. Oh, let me paste you guys on here. Wait, where'd you go? Come along, paste. There we are. So, oh, and T, you've joined the call. I'm more than happy to add one on to you. I just asked everyone to give me an activity. Oh, come on, cooperate. I think that's pretty much where people were plotting. So T, you have a thing about a situation. How do you rate your ability? How do you rate the challenge? I'm happy to plop you on as well if you'd like.
Okay.
Yep.
A kind of an expressive driver, I would think, or more analytical driver. That's where
Analytical driver. Down, you'd be here with Chris and Brian and
yeah.
down here for it. Okay, good. All right. So now we think that while it's interesting to say there are these 4 energies, it doesn't really give us enough points of distinction to give anyone a real kind of meaningful feedback and guidance about what's going on. So we say, there are 4 different types of drivers. So let me scoot the pile out of the way for just a second. So we need to talk about the secondary energy. Not all drivers are created equally. There is a driven driver, an expressive driver, an amiable driver, and an analytical driver. That secondary energy is shown with the word starting with a capital letter and everything else is lowercase. Although we won't be going into it in this program, there are also tertiary energies, and that's where we're getting very fine-tuned to what exact coordinate pair we happen to be talking to. But primary and secondary energies are enough for the vast majority of the work that we do. So the secondary energy answers the question, how does someone go about accomplishing what their primary energy wants to accomplish. So we've already said the driver energy wants to go somewhere, wants to do something, it wants to accomplish whatever it happens to be. They're driven to do that. Well, how do they go about doing that when they're a driven driver? Anybody want to give me a thought? What do you think? How does a driven driver accomplish their tasks?
Bull in a china shop.
Bull in the china shop. They're just going to push through. They're driven. And I could even, I don't mind saying to you, at 11:11, you're looking at a driven driver. And even further out grid, it's a driven driver. So, it's all this drive, which means they're not looking at all in any of the other energies. They're not looking at anything expressive that might be involved, or amiable or analytical that might be involved. They're just pushing through. Now, the expressive driver is first and foremost a driver. They want to make something happen. But the way they make it happen is by adding that expressive element. So that expressive element is all about feeling something and getting people to feel something. And so we often say that the expressive driver is the one who's going to be the cheerleader, the smile on their face that's trying to, get you all motivated and energized and inspired and all those, great kind of things to get you to move forward. So they tend to be enthusiastic. Again, energizing, all those words could be repeated. So the expressive driver definitely wants to get your feelings involved in whatever that goal, that mission happens to be. Can you guys feel a difference between a driven driver energy and an expressive driver energy?
You know what is coming out for me is that it's more inclusive for the expressive driver than in the driven driver, it's more exclusive. It seems.
I think you're right, because to me, the driven driver is very task focused. There's very little involvement with people and other people's ideas and things like that. I mean, they're so on task. I don't even know if they realize there's much around them to do that. Yeah, go ahead.
So so would integration be more upgrid and assimilation be outgrid?
Yeah, we did. Remember, I'm trying to remember.
Yeah,
what the model
I remember you talked about it. I can't remember where it fell out.
Something about group dynamics where, I remember we were talking about mergers and acquisitions. And if you were the acquired company, so that's where that came up. And I do believe that the driven driver is all about conquest. They're all about winning, making it the way they want it, and to hell with everybody who's involved in it and how they feel about it. That's all peripheral, if they even recognize it's even in play. Where the expressive driver really is trying to get you enthusiastic about something, get you to buy in. Remember, we went back to that layer where we talked about the roles last time around. Well, this is where that influencer happens to be. What was the word we used, though? Just one second. No, it's this way. Sorry. No, influencer. Yeah. That's the influencer. Not just energizing you for nothing, but energizing you towards a purpose. That's the big difference. They're trying to influence you to do something, influence you to join forces on whatever the leader is trying to get across for you. So yeah. Okay, how about an amiable driver? What's an amiable driver? How do they want to get something to move forward? What's the
They want everyone on board.
Tell me that again, Anja.
Cautiously.
They want everyone on board. They want people.
They want everyone on board. This is it. So Tim, when you were mentioning inclusiveness in that, it's like if we're talking about people, then I think it's the amiable driver. But if we're talking about people and combining, like finding a mutually shared desired outcome, that's the expressive that's coming into play. So the amiable driver just wants to make sure that everyone's heard, everyone's included. We got in the good old days, we got the right people in the right seats on the right bus going to the right place. That's the amiable driver, is trying to make sure that everyone is recognized, acknowledged, celebrated, included in whatever way they can.
Is the amiable driver the one that's always striving for consensus?
Always striving for consensus.
So that's a very frustrated person.
It can be an extremely frustrating person because, I can look at another layer which say that two of these energies are very fast to take action, and two are very slow. So which two do you think are fast? Driver, expressive, amiable, analytical. Which two are fast and which two
Driver
take their
expressive.
time?
Driven driver, move
The
through.
driver and the expressive are
oriented, yeah.
very fast to get stuff done. And the amiable with the analytical, they tend to take their time. Two of these types are very task focused, and two of these types are more people focused. Which two, again, you got driver, expressive, amiable, analytical. Which two are more task oriented? Which two are more people oriented?
Driver analytical for task.
Yeah, and
Driver,
amiable.
yeah, you guys agree, driver and analytical for task. And the amiable definitely is people, and the expressive is people because they're trying to motivate and all that. So if we really look at that, I could say that a driven driver is about fast tasks, where the expressive driver is fast people. The amiable driver is slow people, and the analytical driver is slow tasks. Can you guys see all that?
Mhm.
Yeah, so that's how it all maps. So there is definitely a difference in the momentum behind these energies, the speed with the energies, the direction. Is it laser focused? Is it a wider shot? So you can really see lots of differences around there. And by the way, just to finish it off, the analytical driver is definitely a driver. All these are definitely, don't think for one moment that just because they're an amiable driver, that they aren't a driver. They want to make something happen, but they know that in order to make it happen, they're going to need to have the right people on board, involved, participating, et cetera, et cetera. So, but they're still, don't forget, they are a driver. They're not an amiable over here on the other side of the ChangeGrid, where it's all becomes a big social service agency. No, we're out here where people are going like, no, first and foremost, we're trying to get something done, but the way we're going to get that done is through our people. And that's the amiable driver's primary mindset. How about the analytical driver? They're definitely a driver. They want to make something happen. But how does that analytical energy impact the way they want to make things happen?
They want facts.
Right. They want to know what's the process, what's our approach, what are the thoughts, you know?
They want to-do lists, they want to follow a certain step process.
Yep. They want to have a process, follow it, and it drives them nuts if someone tries to become a maverick.
They may want to know too much before they're willing to get started.
Well, and a lot of these, I will say though, what you've probably described is a little bit lower on the chain where they're primary analytical, because further downward you go, the more stuck you become. But just think about this line in between. You're a totally balanced analytical driver, driven analytical. You have equal analytical and equal driver contributions to what's going on. Well, I'd still be worried that that strong analytical contribution could be delaying action pending the acquisition of additional data. So everything in the world of the driver quadrant, it can be, I think, really understood with the word enough. So the analytical driver doesn't want to know everything. I promise you, the analytical wants to know everything. The analytical driver just wants to know enough. And the expressive driver doesn't want to be motivating and motivating and motivating. They just want to be motivating what?
Enough.
Enough. And the amiable driver doesn't want to be all warm and fuzzy and cozy and everybody's all friendship, blah, blah, blah. They just want to be amiable. What's my word?
Enough.
Enough. That's it. So because the driver energy is primary, the analytical driver may be missing a lot of stuff, but they feel like they have enough. And so that's what's going on here, because their task focused is still very, let's just say close to even around all four of them. It is also possible you can be smack dab in the middle and just be a balanced driver. So you have equal emphasis placed on the secondary energy. Depending on the situation, you could do that. But generally, we talk about these as being the four energies. So,
but you know, what's interesting is that I think I'm balanced, but it drives me crazy because I'm more of an analytical. But I know I need to bring people in. So it's sometimes it starts as an afterthought.
No,
it's
yeah,
like
it does. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you're an analytical driver, let me give you this little test. I tend to be more of a driven analytical than an analytical driver, mostly because my greatest joy in life is when I tell someone something and they don't take my advice. And it turns out exactly the way that I said it was. I love being able to say, I told you so. So, and I would say that to my clients, my C-suite clients. It's kind of like, I don't know if it's
Who
because,
doesn't? Who doesn't love doing that?
well,
Yeah,
that's the
I don't
whole
know.
thing. And it's, it's like, but my thought is like, look, I always said this to my clients at a certain point. I'd say, look, you're paying me for my time. You can waste it any way you want. And you take my advice, don't take my advice. It's not going to change what my billing looks like. So, although if you don't take my advice, I might be a client, you might be my client longer because now I got to clean up your mess. So it's so much easier. Isn't it easier if people just listen to you and do what you tell them to do from the beginning?
Yes.
Yeah,
Have
it
you
is.
found
It
a
is.
polite professional way to say to someone, I told you so?
Well, I never looked for a professional or a dignified or diplomatic way to say it because my thought is like, look, I was looking for a client when I found that one. And if I'm going to have a client that's not going to listen to me, then do I really want them as a client?
Mm-mm.
But on my way out the door, I'm going to tell them if you're going to pay good money for a consultant, you better listen to what they're telling you because obviously, left to your own resources, you've created the problem that you're in right now. And so you better get some, intellectual DNA from someplace else. And whether that's with me or with someone else, that's all fine and dandy. But I don't know if it's because I'm one of these Sigma types or whatever, but I don't really care what my clients think of me. I care that they take my advice. And if they're not going to take my advice, well, then I don't need them to be my client. So yeah, their failure does not reflect well on me. So if they're going to take my
That's,
advice, good things will happen. Otherwise, I don't need you. I don't need you. There are plenty of people in our industry that are desperate for dollars. Go use one of them.
yeah, that's
Gee,
very,
I'm thinking about Dr. Kahneman's book, Thinking Fast and Slow. I don't know if anyone on the call has read that book. I just
Yeah.
dropped a summary link in the chat,
Oh, thank
but he
you.
talks about the brain as two systems, the fast brain and the slow brain.
Mhm.
And it's really interesting. And so I was thinking of it as you were describing this part of the change grid and the energies. And it's pretty interesting. And now I can certainly overlay it on the change grid with regard to the driver and the analytical.
Yes,
Uh,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well, one of the fun games we play when people are going through their initial certification training is I'd say to them, all right, let's make sure you guys really understand this outgrid quadrant. So let me give you a scenario and you tell me who goes where. So we're talking about the C-suite. We'll make it a simple, straightforward, traditional C-suite. You have a CEO, so the executive officer. You have a CFO looking over all the money. You have a COO looking at all the operations, and you have a chairman of the board. So these are the four types. These are the four main roles inside of a publicly held company. So each one of those occupies one of these four subquadrants. So which of these four is the CFO, COO? I think CFO is the easiest one. So
Yeah.
which would you say is
CFO
the
is the
CFO?
analytical driver.
CFO is the analytical driver.
Chairman is the expressive driver.
Interesting. We'll see if you still hold that thought in a moment here. If it doesn't go there, where do you think the CEO would be or the chairman would be?
I would have said driven driver
Okay, tell us why you think the chairman would be the driven driver.
because the chairman tends to say, this is how I want it, make it happen.
Yeah, they're only interested in a return on their investment. And so, in fact, it's the chairman who usually hires a CEO. What do they want the CEO to do?
Move it.
Yeah,
Goals.
right, execute on
Anyone.
it. And so when I think about what a really good CEO is like, I'm going to say, David, they're the expressive driver.
All right.
because they need to have the vision, share the vision. They need to be good on camera, good in front of a group. They have to be able to inspire others and do all that kind of stuff. Where the chairman is sitting at a board table, we may never see them otherwise. And that leaves the amiable driver. The amiable driver would be the COO. So operations certainly includes personnel. And a lot of other things in operations has to do with making sure that the personnel have the resources that are necessary in order to do the job that needs to be done. And so I think that that's kind of falls more the formal kind of thing, or the operation side of things. Thoughts about that, anybody? Interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you think happens if the CFO is a driven driver?
Well, then everything goes according to finance, and you may not go into strategy.
Right.
Lots of
And
layups.
yes, exactly. And what about if I put, how about if I put a COO as an analytical driver? Does that
Oh.
sound like it's going to turn out well or not so well?
Not
Lots of quitting.
Yeah, right. Because it's all, where's the enthusiasm? Where's the really looking at people and all that? Let's look at the opportunity, the growth plan, I don't think an analytical driver energy has enough compassion, maybe even not enough emotional intelligence to really be that involved with a whole flock of people. So my point in just throwing this out to you guys is to simply say this: different roles require different energy in order to do them well. And if we've got a driven driver, if we've got a chairman that's in the danger zone, anyone concerned about lawsuits and making up rules as they go along? Because remember, the danger zone would be right here, smack dab through the middle of the driven driver. Oh, that's not true. Right here where I'm pointing, between the two Ds, that's where that vertical line would be that would separate the interior of the change grid from the danger zone. So a great deal of the driven driver energy is most definitely in the danger zone. And if you're out here at 11:11 or 12:12, that's a driven driver. They don't believe the rules apply to them. And now we've got whole companies that can be pulled into harm's way, all because of what that individual thought they could get away with. Yep.
Yeah.
All right. So
what does it look like when you're between two energies? Do you take on the balance of one or the other based on the context of the situation you're in? Or what does that look like?
I would say it means you have both energies available to you.
Okay.
And so, for example, if I am smack dab between a driven driver and an expressive driver, I might spend my message being a little bit more on task. Did you guys read in the news about the gal from, is it Herman Miller Furniture? Did you guys see this? She went, okay, well, Herman Miller is a very large, very successful company out of the western side of Michigan. I think they're in Zeeland, Michigan, and they carry several different more upscale lines of office furniture and things like that. Very, very, very good company. And she got all of her people on a call. And last year, she paid herself, or whoever paid her, something like $6.5 million. And she's on this call, and these people are kind of going like, well, are we going to get our bonuses this year? And she basically said to them that they needed to leave Pity City and stop worrying about whether or not they get a bonus and instead focus on getting the $26 million of additional business they're going to need if they want to have a bonus. Well, how do you think that played out in the media and social media? This was posted on social media within a matter of minutes. And suddenly she's on the call apologizing for how people took what she said. Not apologizing for what she said, but apologizing for the way they took it. And because she is an expressive driver who had a little bit too much driven driver energy come into that conversation. She bottom lined it. She showed herself to be totally clueless about how all these people, the average person at Herman Miller makes about 40 some odd $1,000 a year. And she's up there in the 6 million plus kind of category. And she's telling them not to worry about the 10% bonus that they're hoping to get this year. So she's totally out of touch, totally whatever, and it came back to bite her big time. So, so that's what happens when you're in as you move between Expressive Driver, because she should have been talking about. I believe that you guys all have the ability to go out there and find us this little bit of extra money, because this is a multi-billion-dollar company. So going out there and finding an extra 26 million could be a few pieces of business closing. But because of the downturn in the economy and other things like that, and people working remotely more and more, they're just not getting these giant contracts to bring, millions upon millions of dollars of furniture into some new facility. So their business is changing, their opportunity is changing. And instead of telling them how much she believed in them and all that, she instead told them it was time to move out of Pity City.
Yeah, so there seemed like there was a lack of both of those energies were available to her, but it seems as if there was a lack of awareness.
Yep.
And that's why I was asking about that. Like, what does that look like? Because just like today, making healthy decisions, we know it can't be just all thought and no feeling. The two are interconnected. They're always working together, whether we understand it or not. So if you're overwhelmed, by feeling, then you'll be up. Then your reasoning capacity is now compromised.
That's correct.
Right. So most healthy decision has a balance of that they work together kind of seamlessly or integrated.
Well, and that's the goal that you really want. But in all these situations, our counsel to an executive would always be to lean in the direction of the people, not in the direction of the outcome.
Do you think that
the only way you're going to get that outcome is through your people? So why would you piss them off?
I'm reading a book by Stephen Covey's son called Trust and Inspire. And, it talks a lot about there's no such thing as motivation, but you can create inspiration.
Yeah. Well,
and she demonstrated no trust at all by making that statement.
Yep.
I wonder if she was really just expressing temper, if she was just really mad.
Yeah. I think she's worried because she doesn't own the company. She reports to a chairman or a chairperson, as the case may be. And so I wonder if she feels like she's got some heat on her, and she wasn't able to manage her own, as Anja pointed out, anger, her own fears, perhaps. And instead, all this really negative energy came spilling out that was so detrimental to her desired outcome. But sometimes the stupid have to leave to clear up space for the right person to be in the job. So I learned very early on, I have never, ever, ever met an executive that I thought was impressive. Never, not once. I've always wondered how they got their job and how they're keeping it. So
I found two.
Amen to that.
Oh, good. Wow.
Me too.
Me too. Me too.
But I would not say she's one. She feels more challenged by that, because I've said that to somebody and somebody came back and said basically the same thing he did. And it wasn't for me. It was for everybody else who was talking, who was not in the sales position. He said, he told me where to go, but I was speaking for others. It was really stupid.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I want to get out from him because he's a jerk.
Well, right.
So.
And honestly, I mean, I think all of you guys that do this kind of work, you know that the moment we subordinate ourselves to our client in any way, we can no longer be of service to them.
Yeah.
I have to leave. Thank you.
They need to look at us as peers or superiors, or there's no reason for us to even take the deal.
Exactly.
I saw two people join. I couldn't see to click on Allow to Talk. Sorry, Edie. Sorry, Linda. But it's at the top of the hour. So let me just tell you guys that next week, Monday, I believe I'm going to be in Southampton, England. And I would like to have this call. I just don't know what time it is for me. I think it's going to be like 8 p.m. my time, which would still be 1 p.m. Maybe there's a 6-hour time difference. So
6 hours from UK.
All right, so it'd be 7 p.m. for me, which is perfect because I'll just go to dinner afterwards. You tend to eat quite late on a cruise ship, so that's all good. So let's go ahead and just assume that this call is going to happen. And because we'll be close to, well, we'll be in the UK, I think that our internet should be as strong as it can be. So, all right, so with that, I'll thank you all very much for joining in. So you
Thank
guys
you.
Thank you.
take
Thank
care,
you.
and
Everybody.
bye for now.
And hello to Diane.
Hey, sure, I'll let her know. Thanks, everyone. Bye for
Yeah.
now.
Cheers.